Hello, sports fans. It's that time where I am doing an Instagram live. It is 2:32 in LA. We're renting a house. Molnar, you're in the background. You can wave. Uh, and I've got a special guest, my friend Mark Hyman, who has written a book called Young Forever. We'll see about that, Mark Hyman. Anyway, he's going to join us, and let me see if I can find him. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Katie. How's it going?
I was waiting for you, and now you're finally here. Where are you coming from today?
I was actually watching that clip about the internet on your Instagram while I was waiting. It was very funny.
Hilarious. Hilarious. All right, so we've got a lot of people joining because, Mark, you've got a lot of fans out there. And I was telling everyone how we first got to know each other, how you were in the documentary, my first documentary called Set Up, and written this new book called Young Forever, The Secrets to Living Your Longest, Healthiest Life. You all please ask questions. Hi, Australia. Ask whatever questions you have. And I told everybody, Mark, we got a ton on social media. So I'm not gonna ask a ton of my own questions because I really want to get to what people want to know. But here's some to start with because it's about your book. And one of the things you talk about in this book is abnormal aging. So what do you mean by abnormal aging?
Well, Katie, we look around us and we see as people get older that they get frail, decrepit, dysfunctional, they get disease. Over, 80% of people who are over 65 have more than one chronic disease. That's not normal. That's not inevitable. That's actually a disease process that we haven't really identified until recently, because aging has been relegated to sort of the dustbin of medical research. Nobody cared about it. It's just going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. But now scientists are uncovering the underlying mechanisms that underlie all disease. So the things we come to see as normal are really abnormal. And when I was in Sardinia and Icaria and the Blue Zones, I was seeing people who were like 100 years old who I had to chase up the mountain I couldn't barely keep up with, who were fit and functional and engaged and sharp and doing all the things, growing their gardens and making cheese and whatever they did. And that's really what's possible for most of us, is actually a different kind of aging.
Well, why have we bought into the so-called myth? By the way, if you all have questions, I turned off the comments because they can be distracting, although there were some good questions in the comments. But since they're distracting, you can ask your questions in the questions section of this Instagram live. But Mark, I was going to say, why have we believed in the myth of abnormal aging? And, people do lose sort of, I don't know, is it really abnormal?
Well, we do have a decline. If we don't do anything, we will decline. But it's like anything else. If you have a brand new Toyota Camry, you drive it off the lot, it's going to go forever and you can kind of abuse it. But if you have a 1936 Mercedes or, Model T, you've got to take care of it, but it can still run. And there are cars that are 100 years old that still run fine. So we really have to learn how to take care of our bodies to activate these ancient embedded longevity switches or pathways that we kind of run over by our lifestyle and our diet and really all the things we do that kind of make us age faster than we need to. We're all going to get older. I can't change that. But biologically, we can actually turn back the clock and reverse disease. It's pretty impressive. I've seen this on myself. I've seen it in my practice.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about you in a second. But, it seems to me that people, there are a lot of people in this space doing a lot of research. David Sinclair, who said this was an impressive guidebook on the cover. There's Peter Attia. There are a lot of people who are doing enormous amount of research. By the way, mostly men. I think we need to really focus on women more, but that's another
topic. There's one, Morgan Levine. She's at Yale. She's really
okay. Great. I'm going to call her. Per usual, are being marginalized slightly in the research. But having said that, I know that you're talking about not lifespan anymore. You're talking about health span.
Yeah.
What between health span and lifespan?
Well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Health span is a number of years that you're healthy. Your lifespan is the number of years you're alive. And in this country, the last 20% of your life is not with a good health span. You're basically not healthy for the last 20% of your life. So maybe you live to be 80 or so, but maybe the last 20 years kind of suck because you're have all these diseases or end up in a hospital and lots of medication. That's not really necessary or inevitable. So yeah, we all get older and things change, but if you eat right and you exercise and you learn how to manage stress and you do a few of these sort of things that I talk about in the book that are the habits of blue zones, the high phytochemical diet, the social support, the body has these built-in healing, repair, and longevity mechanisms. We've just kind of overridden them with all the crappy shit we do in our lives. So
you're
we
really
actually
talking
continue.
about like managing aging and figuring out how to make it less severe and less problematic and less destructive to our systems. And I know you're 63, Mark, and you say you have the biological
Just a baby.
All right. So how do you figure out your biological age? And more importantly, how did you shave 20 years off it, off your health span?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I think, before we really never had a way of measuring aging. Like we could measure cholesterol, your blood sugar, your weight, or blood pressure. But we never had a marker to look at your cell's rate of aging. And Stephen Horvath and some other scientists developed these epigenetic clocks, these biological clocks that are embedded within us that we can measure now. So measuring the way your DNA is regulated, these little, they're called tags or DNA methylation. It's really
called telemeters or something,
telemeters,
Mark?
that's a little bit different. But basically, you have your genes. There's, 20, 25,000 genes you have, and you can't change that. It's like the keys on a piano, 88 keys. But there's a piano player that plays all those genes. That's called the epigenome. That's above the genes. It can play jazz, ragtime, rock, classical, whatever you want, in an infinite number of songs. And the body is the same way. So the epigenome is influenced by our lifestyle and toxins and stress and everything that happens to us over a lifetime. That can be modified. And so this biological clock is measured by measuring the epigenome and what's happening at that level. And then we can see changes over time. So there are studies where you can, in 8 weeks of changing your lifestyle, reverse your biological age by 3 years. Now, I did it by 20 years, but I don't know where I started because I've always been living a healthy lifestyle. I've always been eating healthy and doing yoga and exercising and trying to meditate. I mean, I've had a lot of stress, but I think the reality is that by fulfilling on these lifestyle habits that I learned about very young, I've been able to keep healthy and to actually probably reverse my age. And I'm gonna actually check it periodically to see, because now we have a biomarker, we can check it and we can see what happens if I eat better, if I exercise, or if I take this supplement. Will I change that biological age? Like vitamin D can change it, for example, in one study. They were able to reverse biologically by a year by just people who took vitamin D. So there's some simple things you can do to do that.
What about your genetics? I mean, somebody asked comments before we turn them on. Or lifestyle. I mean, could you hand in a shitty deck of genetic cards?
Oh, sure. Yeah. You can get a bad card or two. But when you look at the people in Sardinia and Korea and the blue zones, they live to be 100 years old. They have 20 times the centenarians. People live to be 100 that we do. When they come and live in America, they get the same diseases and die at the same rate. So it's not the genetics, it's the environment. And yes, genetics play a role. Maybe it's 10%, 20%, but it's not that significant when it comes to the longevity process. There are some unique longevity genes. I've got one of them, actually. It's called the jackpot gene. It's like the jackpot gene, but it's like, I think that the key is that we actually have the ability to change how our genes are expressed, and that's the whole key to the epigenome. That's the secret of the science of longevity, is learning that we can actually, through influencing how our genes work, that we can reverse the biological clock. And that's really pretty remarkable stuff.
All right. Well, obviously, people are going to buy your book and read it. But can you give us sort of the cliff notes? What are the things that we can do? And then people buy Mark's book so you can read more about it. But if you had to say like the 5 or 6 things that I should be doing, or anybody watching now, I'm 66. Hi, Mark and Pat. My friends just walked in. What are some of the things that we should be doing on a regular basis? And honestly, what is going to be surprising about this book and about some of your recommendations? Because haven't we already heard it all, Mark?
Yeah, no, well, you know what? I thought we heard it all, but then I got more and more into researching this field, and there's so much coming out so fast because most of the science is new. the government never funded it. Nobody studied aging, but now a lot of billionaires who don't want to die are pouring billions of dollars into funding the research.
Right.
So we're learning a lot. So certain things people know, right? And it's the obvious stuff. But just to kind of put a point on it, diet plays a huge role. So the thing that causes us to age fast and die is something we've talked about. We made a movie about it. It's sugar. Sugar and starch is the killer. It's killing our kids. It's killing us. It's driving all the age-related diseases. And there's no way around it. You have to limit or reduce the amount of sugar and starch. I mean, never. But it's just, it's not a...
When you say starch, explain to people
flour.
how it metabolizes some processed and turns it sugar in your system.
Well, the only thing having bread, that's not so bad as having sugar, but actually the glycemic index of bread is 100. That's the gold standard for how food will raise your blood sugar. Table sugar is 65. So table sugar is better than bread in terms of how it affects your blood sugar, because bread is all glucose and sugar has some fructose in it. So it's basically bread and sugar are the same in your body, or anything that's made from flour. So it doesn't mean you can't ever have it. It's just realize this is like a drug you're taking, and we can't be having pharmacologic doses, which we do in this country. I mean, we used to have 22 teaspoons a year as hunter-gatherers. Now we have 22 teaspoons a day, and a lot of us have a lot more. So that...
I just want to interject real quickly, Mark, because another example is like corn.
Yeah.
Corn turns it to sugar in your system.
Yeah. I mean, Cheerios, I think, is healthy, but Cheerios has a higher glycemic index than table sugar. It's like, so you think you're doing something good for yourself, but you're not. So I think getting that key is key. The other thing about aging is it's more important is protein. And this is very controversial in this area. Some people should be vegan to live a long time, do they need meat? The key is muscle. Like, you have to actually build and maintain muscle as you get older to stay functional, to get up off the floor, to get up out of your chair. But if you look at a lot of the data, it says, well, if you eat too much protein, it can inhibit this pathway called mTOR. I mean, it can activate this pathway called mTOR, which means you will accelerate aging. So one of the key strategies around longevity is starvation, or calorie restriction, or time-restricted eating, or intermittent fasting. People have heard about this, right? That's because your body needs a break from food. It needs a break for at least 12, 14 hours a day overnight so that your body can clean up. You recycle, renew, repair, you get rid of old parts. It's really important.
So you're a fan of intermittent fasting?
Well, the terminology is confusing for people, but basically most people mean time-restricted eating. It's basically eating dinner at 6 o'clock at night and having breakfast at 8 in the morning. That's time-restricted eating. It's 14 hours, right? Most people eat till they go to bed, and then they eat as soon as they wake up, and they don't give their bodies a chance to get into this state of cleanup. So you have to have periods of not eating, and then you have periods where you load up on protein, particularly in the morning on a fasted state. So 30 to 40 grams for most people as they get older is super important, and you need high quality protein. The best kind really is whey protein, if you can use that. I use goat whey because it's more sort of sustainable and regenerative. You can also use any other protein you want, but animal protein is actually much better at building muscle than plant protein. And if you do use plant protein, you have to add amino acids to it, like leucine. So the body has this ability to build up and to break down. Just like any system, you need to build muscle, but you also need rest periods. So that's a really key strategy. So time-restricted eating and then protein in the morning, that's a really important thing for aging.
Okay, so reducing sugar, letting your body kind of regenerate itself between meals, start with protein in the morning. Okay.
Which is not what people do. We're all eating like carbs for breakfast, right? We have sugary coffees, sugary teas, muffins, bagels, cereal, pancakes, French toast. It's a disaster. Like, we need more protein breakfast, like a frittata or eggs or a protein shake.
Right. So more of a paleo type diet.
Yeah, a little bit. And then the other thing about diet is that what's really amazing are the discoveries around these phytochemicals, compounds in food that work with our biology to activate these longevity pathways. So we have within us these switches, like we can turn on, that turn off inflammation, that speed up our metabolism, that clean up old cells, that repair DNA, and do all these like amazing things. We have a whole like cleanup and repair team, and we just have to activate them.
Turn them on, Mark.
Well, by doing the things I said, and what's in the book, obviously, and then certain chemicals, like quercetin is a really amazing compound that comes from onions and apples. And catechins in green tea, another amazing compound that works in this way. Resveratrol from red grapes. You can take curcumin, which is a spice you can make from turmeric when you make curries. I made like Indian curry the other night. So you can start to use these things in your cooking and eating them. And then also pomegranate has some amazing things in it. For example, there's this whole concept of maybe a little too complicated, but it's a postbiotic. So when you eat something, the food that you eat gets broken down by the gut bacteria, and then it produces various compounds. Instead of a probiotic, which is like a bacteria, it's a postbiotic. It's made by your bacteria in your gut, and then you absorb it, and it works on your body to do good things. But most of us don't have really good gut bacteria. But if you eat pomegranate and you have the right bacteria, it actually creates something called urolithin A that makes you fitter. Literally, it increases your fitness level, your muscle mass, and cleans up old mitochondria, the old energy powerhouse of your cell, and recycles them and makes them better and stronger. So literally, it's from this plant compound that has all these magical properties to keep us young and healthy.
I wanted to mention a statistic you told me a while ago, Mark, that shocked me. It was how much muscle mass the average person loses a year as they age. And that is absolutely critical to extending health span, isn't it?
That's the next thing. So the key to the building muscle is the protein in the morning, right? And then is resistance exercise. Now, I was lazy. I didn't like gyms. I was scared of all those guys with big muscles and all the weights. I just never went. And by the time I was like about 60, I was like, well, I better do this. I tell people to do it. So I started doing bands, which are less traumatic for people, and you can't really injure yourself like you can with weights. And I've noticed such a change in my body over the last 3 years of doing this. And I think it's so underestimated how powerful resistance exercise is. My father, he couldn't get out of a chair at 88 years old. So I got him a trainer, and he started going to the gym and working out, and was able to end up playing tennis with me, and having, even at 88 years old. So it's never too late to start.
And we're talking about not only bands, but like weight-bearing exercise.
Yeah. You can use body weight. You can use bands. Yeah.
Like planks, for example.
Yeah, planks are great. Planks, body weight exercises. There's all kinds of apps. You can lift weights. There's a million programs out there. I like the Tom Brady training program, which is you buy the bands. It's not that expensive, and the app's $50 a year, and you can do a whole routine. I do it 4 times a week, and I mean, I've just been amazed at what's happened to my body. Even at 63. So I could share a picture with you, but basically at 40 and at 63, I look totally different. Even though I was exercising and eating relatively healthy, it was really understanding this whole dynamic of protein and resistance exercise and cutting down on the starch and sugar that made a difference. Wow. And then the other thing that people need to understand is that relationships matter. That in the blue zones, the thing that really was consistent was a sense of community and connection, and belonging and meaning and purpose. And we look at some large studies in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Having meaning and purpose extends your life by 7 years. I mean, that's crazy. And if you look at, if we got rid of all cancer and heart disease on the planet, we extend our life by 7 years.
Vivek Murthy's book called Together, the Surgeon General, all about this. And social isolation is the equivalent of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
That's how damaging it is to your health. I've never gotten so many questions. There are 99 questions in the question section, everybody. I mean, we should have you back, but don't worry, we're not leaving yet. So
actually, after this, I have my men's group every Tuesday. I get together with friends I've had for 40 years. We do it on Zoom, and we talk and we share about our lives, and we celebrate good things, and we deal with difficult things that we're dealing with. And it's so important. And that was such a big finding in the blue zones, that they have these social cohesion and connections.
And so, and Americans, especially American men, don't seem. I think American women are better at this. If that sounds gendered, I'm sorry, but
no, it's true.
I feel like men just traditionally don't sort of talk about their feelings and don't share some of the things they're going through. And that's what you're doing with this group that you get together with.
Yeah, totally. We've been friends for 45 years, some of us. It's amazing.
Okay. Well, now gut health, we really talked about the microbiome but and then I'm going to get to your questions, everyone, I promise, but talk about the microbiome and talk about inflammation and the role they play, because And joint pain, because
Yeah.
Mark, I feel I exercise, I eat pretty healthy, but I'm so stiff and creaky now.
Mm.
What the hell is going on with my joints?
You need a lube job? Like the Tin
Oh,
Man a little.
yeah, I'm definitely 40. Anyway,
Yeah, well,
there's
it's, one of the things that the science have uncovered are these 10 different things that can go wrong. They call the hallmarks of aging, which are underlying all disease. And one of the most important ones is this idea of like inflammation and inflammaging. They call aging inflammaging. And so that's a big factor. But a lot of the things that we do influence that. What we eat, exercise, stress, sleep, all are regulating inflammation, and so is the microbiome. That's one of the other hallmarks is understanding the microbiome and how as we get older we degrade our gut, we take gut busting drugs, we don't necessarily eat that well, and so we have this whole ecosystem in our gut that's not healthy, and that drives more inflammation. So sugar drives more inflammation, lack of exercise drives more inflammation, stress drives inflammation.
Gluten?
Yeah, gluten and sugar. Sugar is probably the worst, but
really?
Gluten can be. Gluten and dairy, in my patients over the last 30 years, gluten and dairy are probably the two biggest things that people just take a break for 2 or 3 weeks and then see how they feel, then add them back. They'll usually be able to tell what's causing inflammation. So, food sensitivities, gut issues, that plays a huge role in inflammation. And that's one of the things that you have to deal with. And the problem is a lot of the scientists with longevity are now looking at how do we treat inflammation, or how do we treat this pathway or that pathway. And for me, it's really about how do we use the things that nature gave us to actually do this, like our lifestyle and our diet and exercise. These are the things that actually tend to work better too.
Let me ask you some social media questions, and then as I have a bunch in our questions section. But somebody is asking, is keto diet healthy for the long term? And we already heard your thoughts on intermittent fasting, but what about keto for the long term? Is that bad?
Yeah. Well, there's 4
Is it okay for me to drink iced coffee, by the way?
Sure. Sadly, coffee is the biggest source of antioxidants in the American diet because they don't eat many vegetables. But I think, there are these, like I mentioned, these ancient longevity pathways in the body that can get turned on through various things. Calorie restriction, for example, not eating as much as you normally do. Eating 30% less can make you live 30% longer, but you'll be pretty miserable. Time restricted eating, taking a break for 12, 14, 16 hours overnight does the same thing. Fasting mimicking diets that Walter Longo talks about, which is like an 800 calorie diet for 5 days, maybe once a quarter. Ketogenic diets do the same thing. And what they do is they switch us to a different kind of biological process, which is running on fat instead of sugar. And it's way cleaner. Your body's like a hybrid car. It can run on gas, which is carbohydrates, or on fat, which is like electric. And when you run on fat, it actually does all these amazing things. It shuts off inflammation, it increases your antioxidant systems, your stem cells increase, it helps you to shut down all the insulin resistance and all the prediabetes. It turns that completely around. So I would say I reserve that for people who are pretty far down the metabolic pike. If you're a type 2 diabetic on insulin, you might need that to get you out of it. And in some studies, they've reversed 60% of advanced type 2 diabetes with a ketogenic diet. So in the right setting, it's therapeutic. I don't think you need to be on it all the time. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, so I was going to get to that. So I think for someone like that, they might not be on it for a few years. Someone who's basically healthy, it may not be something they need to do on a regular basis. They can go in and out. But I don't think you need to be that extreme. If you just cut down sugar and starch and increase your good fats and have the right amount of protein, you can achieve, I would say, 95% of the same benefits as a ketogenic diet.
Okay. Someone's asking about alcohol. And of course, the New York Times recently said basically you shouldn't drink at all.
Yeah.
So what are your recommendations? Someone asked if she needs, I don't know why I think this is a woman, it might not be, but the question is, do I need to stop drinking wine even in moderation?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, we've been whipsawed back and forth with the, scientific research between this is good, this is bad, this is bad, this is good. It's like eggs are bad, eggs are good, meat is bad, meat is good, butter is bad, butter is good. It's like, and alcohol is the same. And we had some early data that showed that in some population studies that people who drank seemed to actually do better. But it probably wasn't the alcohol. It was all the other stuff. Like in Icaria and Sardinia, they drink wine, but it was local wine. It was all organic, not because it was organic, it was just because they didn't use anything forever. And they had all these other healthy habits, right? Their diet, their movement, their social connections, their stress. So the little wine didn't really have a big impact. So I think depending on where you are and what's going on with your health, a little bit can be fine, but don't drink because you think it's healthy for you, or don't think that red wine is good for you. It's definitely a drug. It's really a poison, and think of it as a recreational treat. So it's okay to have fun once in a while, but it's definitely not a health food.
Someone is asking, should you take protein supplements if you're not a meat eater?
Yes, I think this is really important. If you're vegan, especially as you get older, it's important to understand the biochemistry, the biology, physiology of how we build muscle. Because like we said before, if you lose muscle, everything starts to go to hell in a handbasket. And when your muscle gets replaced by fat, you lower your growth hormones, you can't repair your body as well, your stress hormone goes up, your blood sugar, your insulin goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your cholesterol gets worse, your sex hormones go crazy in the bad way. So it's really bad to lose muscle. It's not just there moving your bones. It's actually doing stuff. It's a metabolic organ. So when your muscle's not good, you get in trouble. So you have to make sure you build muscle. And the science of building muscle is you need a certain amount of protein and you need a certain amount of specific amino acid. It's called leucine. And this is think of it as like the switch that turns on the muscle synthesis. And if you have less than 2.5 grams per protein serving, which let's say 30 grams, which is like a palm-sized piece of protein. If you have less than 2.5 grams of leucine, you won't turn on muscle synthesis. You just can't build muscle. So if you have plant proteins, you need like 6 cups of brown rice to get that, or 2 cups of beans, and just people aren't going to eat that. So you have to actually either take protein powders or take amino acid supplements, which I think it's possible to do, but it takes a lot more, attention and care. Otherwise, you can get in trouble.
What's the best way to get rid of that never-ending bloating feeling? I'm 56. Of course, we've got a lot of questions from women whose weight starts to redistribute once they go through menopause and their hormones change their body fat, and they end up around their belly, and so do men as they age.
Oh, for sure. But it's not inevitable. I think the bloating, I think people are talking about is more fat. But if people have distension, that can be gas. That can be something called bacterial overgrowth. That can be imbalances in your microbiome. That's a whole other topic of how do you deal with, belly problems, gut problems. In terms of the fat that accumulates, that's all due to this high levels of insulin, high levels of starch and sugar. And particularly women, when they go through their 40s and early 50s, there's like 4 hormones that tend to get all out of whack. Stress hormones go up, which causes you to gain belly fat because you're dealing with your kids and your career and your parents, and it's like the sandwich generation for women. It's really hard, and they take the brunt of it. Then they have often high levels of thyroid disease. So 1 in 5 women have malfunctioning thyroid. That starts to happen, and so you get low thyroid. You get high levels of insulin from the starchy carbohydrates in our diet, and so you kind of have this kind of hormonal problem. Yeah. And then menopause starts to happen, and the sex hormones start to go awry, and then you might get higher levels of estrogen in relation to progesterone because you don't ovulate, and then estrogen basically makes you gain weight. So it's what they give cows to make them get fat before market, so they have marbled steak, and so they know they'll give male cows estrogen.
Makes sense, Mark, because as you age and go through menopause, you don't have as much estrogen.
That's right. Initially, when you're like late 40s, early 50s, you are, before you stop menstruating, you do actually tend to have higher levels or imbalances in estrogen and progesterone. So when you get to be like, older, not necessarily when you're 60, but I think I see many women who learn how to manage their metabolism and their health and all these things, and they don't end up having that kind of belly fat. So it's harder, but it's not impossible to fix.
I think a lot of women too, like they think, they just sort of give up, or they say, well, this is just menopause. So I'm speaking from personal experience. It's not gonna really change anything. But I think it may be harder, but I think people sometimes give into it and just say, oh, I have a belly now, there's nothing I can do about it. And then that makes them make unhealthy choices because they feel sort of fatalistic about it. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
because
cookie leads to a whole bag.
Yeah,
right?
a lot of people were asking about losing stubborn midsection of fat, blah blah blah. Someone asked if cold showers are beneficial and how can I do them? Can you talk about that? Because doesn't Tony Robbins do an ice bath every morning?
Yeah, I do too. I think, you know, there's, in the book, Young Forever, I talk about this idea of hormesis, which is really a cool concept. It's basically a stress that doesn't kill you but makes you stronger. So we've been talking a little bit about that. For example, time restricted eating is a sign of like starvation. Your body thinks, oh, I'm starving. That's a bit of a stress. Or you, for example, do resistance training. That's a stress on your muscles. So we now live in these perfectly controlled environments where we have food all the time, where we don't have to move our bodies, where we have perfectly controlled temperatures. And our bodies really don't do well like that. We do well with some stresses, right? And one of the things that we can do is hot and cold therapy. Sauna therapy reduces your risk of death by like 40% in Finnish studies. It's impressive, just by sitting in a sauna for 30 minutes 4 times a week. So hot therapy, heat therapy is one of these stresses that increases something called heat shock proteins that fixes these damaged proteins that happen as you age. It also boosts your immune system. Cold therapy, like a cold plunge or a cold shower, which you can take a 2-minute cold shower in the morning, that actually activates your brown fat and your metabolism, and it makes your dopamine and your neurotransmitters kind of wake up and feel alert and helps your brain. So I use these on a regular basis to basically just maintenance therapy, and I think maybe that's part of how I got to 43 biologically.
Well, you know, that's interesting because I think some people are getting these, or I've heard of these infrared saunas.
Yeah, that's right.
Infrared that kind of changes your...
I mean, it can be any kind of sauna. I mean, in Finland, they didn't have infrared saunas. They just had regular saunas. Steam, sauna, infrared. I mean, infrared, you can stay a little longer, the temperature a little lower. There's sauna blankets now you can get, so you can do it at home. It's not that expensive. You have to buy a whole sauna. So there's a lot of ways you can use heat therapy, but it's so impactful. It helps improve your cardiovascular health, your metabolic health, your stress, reduce your stress levels, helps with detoxification, helps with all these other things that help with healthy aging. So I'm a big fan of incorporating these little stresses in our lives that help us.
How many times a week do you have to say, do the sauna or do the cold shower?
I think, you know, in the study, they'll benefit from doing it once a week. But if they did, the people who did it 4 times a week had the most benefit.
Okay, 4 times a week. We've got a lot of questions. People are really, really confused about supplements, Mark.
Okay.
You know, and you hear a lot of people say, just get your nutrients from food, not from supplements. Yeah. And I mean, how do you kind of navigate the confused world of supplements?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't. My basic view is nobody needs supplements, but only under certain conditions. One, you hunt and gather your own wild food. You drink pure, clean water. You're exposed to no chronic stress, no environmental toxins, and sleep 9 hours a night. Now, if that describes you, I think you're fine. But for the rest of us, you know, our food is so depleted in so many ways. The soils are unhealthy. There's no organic matter. They can't extract the nutrients. Your broccoli has 50% less minerals than it did 50 years ago. Plus, we eat ultra-processed food. It's 60% of our calories. I've been on the front lines of doing this for decades, 30 plus years, and I test all my patients for their nutritional status. And people who see me generally are fairly aware, educated about it. Wouldn't be coming because they don't want to tell them to change their diet. And people who has a pretty healthy diet have rampant vitamin nutritional deficiencies, B vitamins, vitamin D, iron, zinc, and omega-3 fats. And these play a huge role in our health and longevity. And like I mentioned earlier, in one study, they reversed biological age by a year by just giving people vitamin D. So I think the basic minimum would be a vitamin D supplement, fish oil, and a multivitamin. And then you can kind of get all fancy. I take, for example, certain supplements, like I take green tea supplements, quercetin for longevity. I take curcumin, which is from turmeric, as a supplement. So I take some of these extra phytochemicals, and I take also something called NMN, which is a little controversial, but that's David Sinclair's work on looking at how we activate some of these DNA repair mechanisms and it's really promising data in animal models, and it's a very safe product.
That's so interesting. Not to name drop, but at Bono's book party, and he mentioned that to me.
Yeah.
Is that phrase a lot of people? And what is it exactly? Is it a pill?
It's something that actually your body uses to naturally activate one of the longevity switches called sirtuins, which are these embedded pathways that get trampled over by sugar. But when you actually limit the sugar and you take some of these phytochemicals and activate these pathways, or this NMN or NAD, you can actually turn on your DNA repair. You can reverse insulin resistance. You can make your mitochondria better. You can increase your antioxidant systems, decrease inflammation. So all the things you want to do to live a long, healthy life can be done through sort of activating these longevity pathways. So, but what the cool thing is there's a lot of ways to get into these pathways, right? Diet, exercise, some of these stress things like hot and cold therapy, phytochemicals from plants, meditation. Yeah. I mean, Deepak, who's a friend of both of ours, he did some amazing studies looking at, meditation for 8 weeks and what happened with gene expression, inflammation, and change in the brain. So, we don't have to be like superhero healthy. We just have to do some basic things, and it'll make a huge difference.
By the way, it sounds like a lot of work to me, but I don't think it is.
Well, it's a lot more work to feel like crap and not be able to do it.
I was talking to my friend Mark Hyman, Dr. Mark Hyman, who wrote a new book called Young Forever, and he's just telling us some basic things that are in the book. This is a funny question. What foods boost libido naturally for both men and women?
That's a good one.
Are there?
So I'll tell you what's a libido killer is, surprise, sugar and starch. Because when insulin levels go up, your blood sugar, your testosterone levels go down, and then your sex drive and function go down. So it really is a disaster. How to get them up? Exercise is an amazing way to boost testosterone. So, for example, strength training, lower body exercises boost testosterone. Having good fats actually boost testosterone. So fat is what testosterone is made from. So that's a really simple thing to do. And so cut out sugar and starch, eat more fat, and resistance training, and your hormones will go in the right direction.
What about bone loss? I mean, that's something that I have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Osteopenia, osteoporosis, especially in women, I think more than. So what are your recommendations? Calcium supplements?
Well, no, we kind of got off the calcium supplements. We were on a big calcium supplement train for years. We realized that wasn't working that well and maybe causing some harms. In fact, vitamin D is probably the #1 intervention for making your bones strong and healthy, plus resistance training. So it all comes down to the same stuff, which is good because it works for everything. And as we lose muscle, our bones tend to get weaker and thinner. So building muscle is building bone. And so doing the weight training, doing the body resistance exercises, taking vitamin D, vitamin K2 also is really important. And getting calcium from food, which is abundant if you're eating a lot of greens, and chia seeds are great in calcium. There's a lot of ways to get calcium through food that you don't need. Sardines with the bones in them are a great source. So I don't rarely recommend calcium supplements, but I think I've seen women dramatically increase their bone density over, a period of a year or two by just using lifestyle and these key strategies.
A couple of people are asking how they wean themselves off sugar. And it's a lot, but it's really hard. I have a terrible sweet tooth, and I try to avoid sugar, but I crave sugar, and I don't know whether it's sort of emotional eating or habit, or I feel like lethargic, and I think it's a little bit of a energy boost. I know you're going to tell me, like, eat blueberries, eat strawberries.
No. Actually,
Don't
you remember? Kate, don't you remember we made a movie about this? the key is that we are addicted. Like, it's biologically addictive in the brain, and so we have to understand that we're not playing on an even playing field here. It's not just about like, oh, I'm like sugar. It's really powerful. Now, certain things will make you want to crave sugar. Not sleeping, for example. If you're tired, you'll crave more sugar and carbohydrates. If you're stressed, your cortisol levels go up, so you'll crave more sugar and carbohydrates. So independent of anything else, that will cause that. But if you want to really reset your basically sugar clock, I wrote a book about it. It's called The 10-Day Detox Diet. And essentially, the key is to eat protein and fat in the morning. If you eat protein and fat in the morning, which is good for your muscles and everything else, right? It will actually make you feel full and cut that spike and crash of sugar that happens throughout the day. So if you start with oatmeal, it sounds good, but actually you'll get this spike and you'll be craving and hungry. So eating fat and protein is so key at every meal to cut the carb and sugar cravings.
Give me what are you looking at?
So I have eggs. So for example, like for breakfast, I would have a couple of maybe poached eggs or lightly fried eggs, and I would put in have some tomatoes, some avocado, pour some olive oil on it. That's an example. Or I would make a protein shake with whey protein. I might throw in some MCT oil and some berries and stuff to make it a little taste good, and that's it. And that just keeps me going, and I don't feel hungry. I don't craving sugar.
And you don't
have
those energy swings that
no. And now you can get these continuous glucose monitors, so you don't have to guess. You can check, and you can wear it for 2 weeks or a month or however long you want to wear it. But it'll tell you, oh God, I'm like going all over the place with my sugar, and you want to be more like this. Because when your sugar is going like this, as soon as it's dropping, your body's programmed to think of it as an emergency and as a life-threatening emergency, and you got to get sugar like now. Like we've all been in that state, right?
And your taste buds change.
Yeah.
You have to get acclimated. If you cut those things out of your diet, you stop craving them. You just have to kind of stick with it for, as you said, 10 days or 2 weeks. And then the cravings do subside.
Just 3 days, I find 2 or 3 days of just shifting your diet and cutting out the starch and sugar and protein, fat. It's like people, I did a workshop once. This one's like, I've been addicted to sugar for like 20 years. No way I can do this. I'm going to try. But like in 2 days, she was like, I'm good. Like I don't have any cravings. And I think people don't realize how close they are to feeling good.
We got a lot of questions, Mark, on Ozempic and this.
Yes, we do.
I guess for people who are really obese, it's a lifesaver. But it sounds like to me, and I'm in Los Angeles, and from what I hear from people, is that those people who need to drop 10 pounds or whatever are starting to take Ozempic, and I don't know. It also hasn't really undergone any long-term studies. So how do you feel about it?
I mean, look, it's a diabetes drug, first of all, and it works through helping regulate blood sugar and insulin. It can be helpful in diabetics and in people who are diabetic, who need to regulate their blood sugar and weight. But for people who just want to lose a few pounds, it's really not a risk-free proposition. One, it's insanely expensive. It's like $1,700 a month. And second, it has potential side effects of cancer. And third, we're learning some other things that I'm concerned about, that it causes you to lose muscle. So you might lose fat, but you also lose muscle and maybe more muscle. And that, in the long run, is a bad thing because your metabolism will slow down because your muscle burns 7 times the calories as fat. And so then you end up trying to stop it, and you can't, and you gain the weight back. So it's one of those things. It's a vicious cycle. And I think, they're talking about using it as a weight loss drug now for the Wegovy, this new one. And when you do the math, there's 75% of Americans are overweight. That's over 2 million Americans. If we were to put everybody overweight on this drug, it would be $425 billion a month or $5.1 trillion a year. That's more than their entire healthcare expenditures, which is more than double any other country in the world already. So it's just an insane proposition, and you don't need to do that to get the benefit.
And plus, don't you have to stay on it indefinitely? And by the way, backtracking a second, I've never heard of the cancer. What are you talking about? That Ozempic caused cancer?
Yeah, just go on the Ozempic website of the drug company that makes it and read the fine print of the risks and the black box warnings and the thyroid cancer, the pancreatitis, and it's not like, oh, this is a free ride.
Drug, yeah. Well, that's important to know, and also, it seems like you may have to stay on it indefinitely. Or
that's the thing.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Can you wean yourself off it, or do you just have to stay on it like diabetics have to stay on insulin?
Yeah. Well, actually, diabetics don't have to stay on insulin. They can get off it, and that's key with using this approach. But if you change your lifestyle, you can get off it. If you change your lifestyle, you can get off your diabetes drugs and your insulin. And I have so many patients. I had a patient lost 134 pounds and got off 10 medications, including insulin, just by following the 10-day detox diet. And it's so easy to do that if you know what to do and how to turn the dials, right? If you don't, like, what is that joke? The doctor gets his patient, his appendix out, and the sends him a bill for $1,000, and the patient goes, "That's a lot for such a simple operation." He's like, "You're right." He says, "I'll send you a new bill." He says, $1 for taking out your appendix, $999 for knowing what needs to be taken out. So it's not that hard. You just have to know what to do.
Hey, before we go, Mark, and you've been so generous as always with your time. We got so many questions from people who are watching, and thanks for watching, everyone. And again, Mark's book is called Young Forever. One person says, are the things you talk about in the book affordable to the average person? I think that's a really good question. And I think there's an easy answer to that, where it's less expensive to eat well in many cases.
It is, yeah.
Although, I don't know. You look at how much organic produce costs and everything, Mark.
I mean, if you go on the way to organic and heirloom this and that, but eating just real food is not that much more expensive. Remember that family in Easley, South Carolina, Brady and his mom, and I mean, they lived in a trailer, a family of 5 on food stamps and disability. They had $1,000 a month for the family of 5 for food. I mean, they lost 200 pounds in a year by learning how to eat well for less, by eating real food, by getting rid of all the junk food. Brady, went on to gain weight back, but then he lost another 134 pounds, and he sent me a request to write him a letter of recommendation for medical school, and they went to medical school. He's a doctor now.
Awesome.
So, it's so awesome, right?
I'm so proud of him.
And that, that was such a simple thing. All I did was show him, here's how you make real food from scratch. Here's the ingredients. Here's a guide on how to eat well for less. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming or expensive. So a lot of things I'm talking about are either free or not very expensive. So for example, eating well, as we discussed, and this just studies after study looking at how eating well can be the same price as eating badly. In fact, you're going to probably save money if you do it right. Second, exercise is free. Third, learning to meditate is free, or doing breath work is free. Having friends is free. Building your social community is free. I'm taking a vitamin. Okay, for $1 a day, you probably could get a multi-fish oil vitamin D. That's a good quality, and that'll do it for most people. So just those things are pretty simple. A cold shower, you have to live in a house, but if you have a house, you can run a cold shower, and that's free. A hot bath is free. So, I mean, maybe you have to pay for the electricity for the heat, but it's really affordable for most people. And there's these simple practices that I talk about in the book that are really accessible. I mean, in these places, Sardinia and Korea, they didn't have a lot of money, but they actually were doing all these practices, short of the hot and cold therapies, but they were doing a lot of these practices that are available to everybody.
Somebody asked about the pros and cons of almond and oat milk. I think oat milk is not supposed to be that great, Mark.
I mean, it tastes good, but it basically got a very high glycemic index, meaning it's like drinking soda. So I love it, but it's a treat, and I would not use that every day in your coffee.
Someone asked about a histamine diet. Hold on 2 seconds. They said, talk about the low histamine diet and what creates those symptoms. I'm not sure I know what they're talking about.
The topic of longevity, but I'll give a little bit of suggestions. So a lot of people have leaky gut, and they have all sorts of gut issues. It's the number one reason people go to the doctors. They have irritable bowel, they have reflux. It's a huge problem for Americans. And when you have a bad gut and a bad microbiome, you often get food reactions, and you start to get inflamed and swollen and puffy and joints hurting, and maybe even worse, you get like hives or swelling in your face or tongue. And histamine is what happens when you get a bee sting, for example, or you eat peanut allergy, you get high histamine, or allergies, right? This is happening from the food we're eating. So if we can fix our gut and we can kind of reduce foods that have high levels of histamine, we can kind of get that under control. But it's really very specific for people who have allergies and allergic problems, and not a ton of people have it. I mean, it's common, but it's not like the biggest thing we're fighting right now.
Yeah. I want to ask this because somebody said they fear that some of your research is snake oily, that you're selling stuff. And I want you to respond to that, because it seems to me that, people are always sort of skeptical about people who are writing books and coming up with recommendations. And I'm sure you've probably heard that before.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it.
Snake oil is very high in omega-3 fats, so.
So what do you say when people question that?
It's a fair question. I think, in terms of personally me, most of my content is free. So my podcast, Doctor's Pharmacy, is free. I have free content all the time, putting it on social media. I write tons of articles, lots of programs. The books, are not free, but they're, you can get it for like $12 on Kindle or something. It's not going to break the bank for most people. And so I think people get concerned about people profiting from things that they're selling that don't have scientific backing. But I'm very careful about the things that I encourage or promote people to do that have scientific backing that I can stand behind or that I do personally. So I don't recommend anything that I haven't done or tried myself. And sometimes I'll recommend this product or that product, but I think it's out of a place of wanting to help people. And the truth is, most of the things that I said that people can do are free. So, I think nobody has to buy anything other than food, which you have to buy to eat, but you have to buy the right food. And then the rest is pretty much, affordable for most people. So, I think it's okay to support things that you believe in. And I don't think there's a problem if you do your homework.
And in closing, I wonder the name of the book, Young Forever. I mean, the fact is, we can't be young forever, Mark.
Here we can. Here we can.
Wondering if this is setting people up for, setting their expectations so high, and they're never, I mean, how can we both want to be as healthy as we can for as long as we can, Mark, but also destigmatize aging in a culture and a society that's already quite ageist?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I am not anti-aging. I am pro-healthy aging. And the reason I wrote the book was to help people understand that they have a choice about how they age. They can either age well or they can age poorly. And that's up to us and our habits and and what the science is telling us about what we can do to actually turn on some of these healing systems in our body that we've neglected. So it's really a very empowering message. It's not about not dying. It's not about not getting older. I'm getting older. I mean, I actually look forward to getting older. You get older, you get wiser, you get smarter.
I'm not looking forward.
You get more fun. I mean, I'm going to keep going until I can. And I want to enjoy life. And I saw this guy was 100 years old riding his horse. Most people wouldn't walk across the street without their walker at 100 years old, and here's a guy bolt upright riding his horse in one of the blue zones. So I think we have to not expect that we're going to go into this rapid decline that we see around us, that we can actually choose to live a life where we're more engaged, more present. And actually, when we've done a lot of the hard stuff in life, we can really enjoy it and we can be able to contribute more and give back. I see what you're doing, Katie. You're constantly giving back to the world. You could probably stop working right now if you wanted to, but you don't. Why? Because you want to keep making the world a better place, and you have the knowledge and the wisdom. You've seen so much. That's what all of us can do. And what's really interesting is the economics of it. When you look at, we're going to all get older, and that's going to put a drain on society. And actually, the data sort of speak otherwise. When you actually take care of yourself, you live a longer, healthier life, and then you die suddenly and cheaply. If you don't take care of yourself, you die long, slow, expensive, painful deaths. And we can actually add huge value to society. David Sinclair wrote a paper about this, where for every healthy life year you extend your life, you would save $37 trillion in the economy.
Wow.
If you do 10 years, that's $370-something trillion. So it's an enormous amount of money collectively it would save by creating a healthy society. And so I want to mentor people. I want to give back to the world. I want to make the world a better place. And I'm not having to just survive anymore. So I'm in a place where I can do that. I think most people can be elders and be wise people and cultivate that. And we just discard our old people in this country. It's terrible.
And I think continuing to have purpose is a way to be young forever as well.
Yeah. There was that great documentary with Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and Norman Lear, and it was just so Dick Van Dyke, and they're all in their late 90s, and they're all working, and they're making people laugh, and they're still hanging out, and that's what's possible for us.
Well, Mark, I always love talking to you. I know that everybody watching appreciates your time. I just want to tell everyone that your book is called Young Forever: Secrets to Living Your Longest, Healthiest Life. Thank you, my friend. We'll put this, we're going to keep this on Instagram if anybody missed it.
Yeah.
And luck on the book tour, and thanks always for your guidance and wisdom, Mark.
Thanks, Katie. You're the best. Love you.
Okay. Talk to you
Bye.
soon, buddy. Bye.